here إن شاء الله. طيب ممتاز. Let's see, what's the time? Make sure if anyone needs. Okay, well, it is 10:03, so I'm assuming everyone made it in by now. If anyone has not, inshallah ta'ala, they can catch up with us. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Let's go ahead. Let's see. We stopped at وَلْيَقْتَصِرْ. نعم. Let's go ahead and begin. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين. والصلاة والسلام على سيد المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحابته أجمعين وبعد. We paused at where the author says وَلْيَقْتَصِرُ المتوضئ أو وليقتصر بالجزم with السكون النراء أي المتوضئ حتما أي وجوبا على غسل أو مسح واجب فلا يجوز تثليث ولا إتيان بسائر السنن. So at times and in certain situations I can't do every act 3 times. Okay? Now, normally I have the option of just doing everything once or everything twice or everything 3 times. As the Prophet ﷺ, he made wudu marra marra, thintani thintani, and thalathan thalatha. The sunnah, the perfection is everything 3 times. But there is times where I can't actually do the 3 times, meaning that it would be prohibited for me to even do it. وَلَا إِتْيَانٌ بِسَائِرِ السُّنَنِ, and you wouldn't even do all of the sunnahs. When is this? He says لِضِيقِ وَقْتٍ. لِضِيقِ وَقْتٍ means there's no time. يعني say you were at work and you got home right before Asr, but there's just no time. If you stand here and perfect your wudu to the max, to the fullest, then what's going to happen? You're going to miss the time of dhuhr. So you have the opportunity here to do every act once or even do the bare minimum of whatever, some of the sunan, and then go ahead and pray before the time leaves. Or else it's going to do qada, it's going to be qada. عن إدراك الصلاة كلها فيه. You won't be able to pray the entirety of the prayer in its time. And we spoke about this in the beginning, right? We said that Ibn Hajar says what? Ibn Hajar says that if I have the option to catch some or catch all, and then the wajib is to catch all. While Imam al-Ramli says if you catch a rak'ah and al-Khatib is with him, if you catch a rak'ah, then you've caught the prayer. Tamam? He says كما صرح به البغوي وغيره, as Imam al-Baghawi has stated. He stated this in his Tahdhib. At-Tahdhib is a rewrite of his teacher's work. Imam al-Baghawi, al-Husayn ibn Mas'ud, his teacher al-Qadi Hussein, he is considered the next Shafi'i of this time. Okay, and who studies with al-Qadi Hussein? Al-Baghawi, Imam al-Haramain. They study with al-Qadi Hussein. Okay, and sometimes he's referred to as al-Qadi al-Hussein al-Marwazi. So al-Baghawi, he states in his book At-Tahdhib, which is supposed to be a summarization, an abridgment of his teacher's efforts. He says, وَتَبِعَهُ الْمُتَأَخِّرُونَ. Everyone really that came after him agreed with him on this point, on the point that we just made about if I'm limited on time, I'm going to do the bare minimum. I'm going to do the obligatory acts only, or every act, including the sunnahs, everything once, so I can catch the time of the prayer. He says, لكن, however, أفتى في فوات الصلاة, in his book of fatwa, Fatawa al-Baghawi, he words a question being presented to him a little bit differently. He says, لو أكمل سننها بأن يأتيها ولو لم يدرك ركعة. He said that you should do the sunnahs even if you're only going to catch a rak'ah. So now let's get the scenarios here adjusted. Imam al-Baghawi in his book At-Tahdhib, he said what we previously said. No difference of opinion on that. In his book of Fatawa, though, he has presented a question. And that is, if I do the sunan, I'm not going to catch the entirety of the prayer. Tamam? He says, do the sunan even if you just catch a rak'ah. Even if you just catch a rak'ah. It is precedent for what Imam al-Ramli says later on, as we discussed in previous classes, right? It is a precedent for him. Where now Imam al-Baghawi, in one of his books, he's saying, no, so you can catch the entirety of the prayer in its time. But then in his fatwa, he's saying, well, if you do them and you'll catch, and do basically your bare minimum, at least you're going to catch a rak'ah in the time. But why did Imam al-Baghawi change his opinion? Why is he giving us two different opinions? Is it more like this is what's best, but here's this other option too? What's going on here? We don't have a clear statement from al-Baghawi himself to separate both scenarios. It seems as if they're both the same. He says, though, and this is a very important point for a student of fiqh to pay attention to, he says, وَقَدْ يُفَرَّقُ or يَفْرَقُ, you can say يَفْرَقُ without a تجديد, that's fine. بأنه ثم اشتغل بالمقصود فكان كما لو مد في القراءة. Now, there was a little bit of difference in the scenarios between what is in it tahdib and what's in his fatwa. You see, what's in his tahdib is talking about wudu and the salah, while what's in his fatwa is talking about if you're already in the prayer. If you notice, if you have the Arabic in front of you, it says what? It says sunaniha. But in principle, there should not be a difference. Let me help you understand one more time. I have to pray dhuhr, for example. The time that's left, we'll say there's 20 minutes until Asr comes in. Okay, I delayed dhuhr, knowing that I would be able at a later time to pray it, assuming on time. Mumtaz? Mumtaz. But 20 minutes is not enough for me to do a perfect wudu and then pray dhuhr, and both of those things concluding before the time of Asr starts. So what do? I have options. I can, instead of doing every act 3 times, I can do every act twice or once, or not do the sunan altogether and just focus on the obligatory acts because of the time. It's a necessity matter. Now, normally, it is very disliked that you only do the obligatory acts. Very disliked. But we're talking about a situation of necessity here, and this is why we're making that exception. And Imam al-Baghawi states this in Al-Tahdhib. He's summarizing it from what Al-Qadi Hussein said. All of the ulama, Imam al-Haramain Majlis, everyone agrees to what we just said. Tamam? Tamam. A minority do state that if you catch a rak'ah, you're okay. So you can add that into the equation, but that's Imam al-Ramli's argument. We're going to focus on Ibn Hajar's discussion. Al-Baghawi, in his fatwa, he's presented a question. I'm in that scenario. I finished my wudu. I have enough time to pray. I'm praying, should I fulfill my sunan or no? Because of time. Because if I fulfill my sunan, well, you might extend the prayer too long. What should I do? Imam al-Baghawi says, fulfill your sunan, as long as you catch a rak'ah in the prayer. Now, Al-Imam ibn al-Bari is saying, okay, maybe there is a difference between the two. And the argument that he's going to make is that maybe it's because the question, this is what Imam al-Bari is saying, is presented as I'm already in the prayer. Because that's how the question is presented to al-Baghawi. So al-Baghawi is looking at it, well, you're already in it, you're already doing it. It doesn't make sense to do other than that. And some of the ulama did not agree with this breakdown, this approach. Because if I'm already in the prayer, shouldn't I still minimize my activity in order to catch the entirety of the prayer within the time? But then he mentions a precedent, a very interesting precedent. If someone began the salah and continued reading and reading and reading Quran until the time went out, did the person miss the prayer? The ulama came and said, and this is where the precedent where Imam al-Malibari, where he has a really good argument here, right? A really good one. And that is, this is called al-ishtighalu bil-maqsood. Al-ishtighalu bil-maqsood. It's a rare scenario. And most of the Shafi'i will say the person has caught the prayer. Remember the hadith where a Sahabi, he goes and prays behind the Prophet ﷺ, and the Prophet ﷺ starts with Al-Baqarah, right? And then after he finishes Al-Baqarah, he goes right into Al-Imran. He finishes Al-Imran, he goes right into Surah Al-Nisa. Imagine that scenario. So I started my prayer, and I want to, in the first rak'ah, I want to do Surah Al-Baqarah, and the next one, I want to do Surah Al-Imran. I look at the clock and I say, I think I have enough time, hypothetically. And I start reading, and I do a maddi here, I raise my voice there, I make it sound nice here, I take a lot of breathing moments as I am reciting. By the time I finished, I looked and I said, oh, the next prayer already entered. Is my prayer in that scenario on time or no? Most of the Shafi'i will say it's on time because you were already within the act and you assumed that you had time. So Imam al-Malibari radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he's saying we could use that discussion and say that's why Imam al-Baghawi gave that other answer. Some ulama, they're not accepting this. Some ulama actually went as far as saying, no, al-Baghawi maybe made a mistake, or maybe he meant because it's very frowned upon in the prayer to not do the sunan, extremely worse than not doing the sunan in wudu. He didn't even want to take it to that discussion, and therefore, since we want to maintain the sunan, we're going to have to make an excuse of, well, since I'm doing the sunan, if the time goes beyond the time of prayer, I'm excused. Why am I excused? I'm excused because I'm doing the sunan, I'm doing the acts. This discussion right here is very important for you to understand. We study a science, what is it referred to as? علم القواعد الفقهية. القواعد الفقهية revolves around rules that we deduce from the ahkam that turn out as if they are practically governing the rules themselves. We have the 5 major ones. Then we have in each chapter a set of rules that pertains to those individual topics. For example, we have al-yaqeen la yazulu bil-shak. Certainty cannot be overturned with doubt. That's from the chapter of Tahara originally, but it applies to other chapters as well. Al-umur bimaqasidiha. Everything is done for a purpose. That purpose, intention, that's what we're going to be looking for. La darara wa la dirar. La darar wa la dirar. That means no harm present, no harm done, and therefore the following qa'idah deduced from that qa'idah, ad-darar yuzal. Harm must be removed. Al-aslu fil kalam al-haqiqah. Doesn't mean apparent, as a lot of people, they'll repeat that qa'idah and they assume that it means the apparent or the known meaning. No. Al-aslu fil kalam al-haqiqah, it means that words were initially used for certain purposes. If the same person uses those same words in the same situation, in the same context, then it has to hold the same as the original meaning. Person. We're not talking about jinn or angels or anyone else. We're speaking about people. That's what it means. الأصل في الكلام الحقيقة. So when someone comes and says, I said to my wife, you're divorced, and he comes and says, no, 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 no. We were playing cards and there's a move called you are divorced. I'm going to tell him, yeah, no. When you say to your spouse, you're divorced, that's a talqa. Oh, no, no. We say الأصل في الكلام الحقيقة. Okay, that's what al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya is. However, when we start to bundle things under certain principles, foundational concepts, we run into a problem. What's the problem? Let me give you an example. With fasting, no, actually, no, not with fasting. Let's start with wudu from the beginning. With wudu, when do we do our intention? When we begin the obligatory act in wudu, right? That's for the obligatory intention. All right, the beginning. Well, what if I want to do the intention for the sunan? Well, it's at the beginning of the sunan. Well, what about when I pray? It's when I say Allahu Akbar. My niyyah is present. It's in my heart. Okay. Zakah, when I'm giving out zakah. All right, perfect. It's always at the beginning of the act. Siyam. This is a little trickier. That's tricky. You see, because unless I am standing looking at the sky, the first moment the siyam enters, I can't know it. Oh, but I have a clock and I have an ab. It doesn't mean it's by the minute accurate. Remember, your abs work on a region and it's producing a prediction. So accuracy is always going to be off. You would have to double check your area, maybe even go out and look. That's what a student of knowledge is supposed to do. All right. So what does this mean? This means that when it comes to siyam, it's not going to be at the beginning of the act. So siyam needs intention, yes, like wudu, like salah, like zakah, right? Right. But then there's a difference in application. Wudu and prayer, it comes in the beginning. With siyam, it comes the night prior. Tabit al-siyam, tabit al-niyyah. The night prior, ya Allah. And that's not the only act of ibadah where the niyyah shifts a little bit. Other acts as well tend to have this different relationship with the niyyah than wudu and salat have. Knowing the difference between these is called al-furuq. That's a science, the science of al-furuq. The things that differ between different chapters. As I told you, after tayammum and after ghusl, well, I'm going to do a list of comparisons, the differences between wudu and tayammum, which we're about to speak about tayammum, the differences between wudu and ghusl, differences between ghusl and tayammum, and so on. Why? That's a science called the science of al-furuq. One of the earliest books written in the science of furuq is by Al-Imam Abu Muhammad al-Juwayni. Tamam. Then there's ashbah, things that look almost identical, but their verdict is completely different. Their verdict is completely different. The reasoning is different, which causes the verdict to be different. That's it, ashbah. Then you have nada'ir. Nada'ir are ruling is the same, scenario is the same, two completely different topics, yet the entire structure of the scenario, they're the same between these two chapters. Like in this example, right? What did he say? He said, وَيُفْرَقُ بِأَنَّهُ ثَمَّ اشْتَغَلَ بِالْمَقْصُودِ. Here, there's what? He's differing between the two. Between, I didn't start my wudu and salah, and I'm going to do this to my wudu so I can catch the prayer in time. It looks like this other scenario where someone's already praying. Tamam. This is where he says, وَقَدْ يُفَرَّقُ or يَفْرُقُ, that there's a difference, is that this person already started. Our first scenario, we didn't begin yet. This is important. الشروع في المقصود غير عدم الشروع في المقصود. Meaning, if I have not started something, that's going to be different than a person that has already started something. And this mas'ala of being I've already started it or I have not started it yet has a great impact on many masail. For example, there are things that are not allowed. There are things that are not allowed to initiate. However, if other things happened, then you can do so as a follow-up. Okay? وهذا يعني لم يشرع فيه مقصودا ولكنه شرع فيه مضمونا. Along with it. And inshallah ta'ala, one day we'll go over it. If you're wondering what's a good book to start with, I recommend this book right here. All right, this is an explanation on Al-Fara'id al-Bahiyya by Imam al-Ahdal. It's called Al-Fawaid al-Janiyya by Imam al-Fadani. Beautiful book in the science of Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya to start with. If you don't want to do this one, there's so many other ones. There's Qawa'id al-Imam al-Lahji, for example. It's a beautiful starting point as well. Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya is really where a faqih grows. And remember, you have Ashbah, Nada'ir, and Furuq. Al-Qawa'id al-Fiqhiyya it's almost like taking all the concepts of fiqh and organizing. Imagine, building blocks like Legos. It's like separating the Legos into different piles, right? Here's the red ones, here's the yellow ones, here's the purple ones, here's the green ones. All right. And then now I have al-ashbahi wal-nada'ir. Now I'm going to say, oh, well, these pieces look alike. Now I'm going to have al-firaq or al-furuq. I'm going to say, well, these parts don't look alike or have small differences. Here they are. Tamam. That's ilm al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyya. He says, أو قلة ماء. Another reason why you would not do your sunan in wudu or you would not do every act 3 times is that you have a limited amount of water. بحيث لا يكفي إلا لفرض. Well, in that scenario, you're not going to do any of the sunan whatsoever. تمام. He says, فلو كان معه ماء لا يكفيه لتتمة طهره إن ثلث أو أتى السنن أو احتاج إلى الفاضل لعطش محترم حرم استعماله في شيء من السنن وكذا يقال في الغسل. So if a person does not have enough water to the extent where if he were to do every act 3 times or if he were to do the sunan, then he would not have sufficient amount of water for his obligatory acts, or he needed the water for someone to drink. He says muhtaraman. What's a muhtaram? Something that I am supposed to value their life. In Islam, there are things, people, creatures, I'm supposed to honor their life and respect their lives and watch out for their well-being. When one of those are present, those two would need to drink, and then therefore, if I only have this limited amount of water, I can take some for my fard and leave the rest for them to drink. And in that, if that is the scenario, that is the case, doing any of the sunan would actually be haram, because then you would be causing someone to lose their lives, including your own. وَكَذَا يُقَالُ فِي الْغُسْلِ. The same thing is said about ghusl. وندبا على الواجب بترك السنن لإدراك جماعة لم يرج أو لم يرج غيرها. And it's recommended to focus only on the obligatory acts. Don't do the sunan or don't do every act 3 times if you're trying to catch a congregational prayer, that there is no other congregational prayer but that group of people that have gotten together. That's recommended that you don't do every act 3 times. Just do once, right? Or stick to the obligatory acts only. He said, Na'am. This is another nadhir. Another nadhir is coming up. Okay, and on that point, you can actually see in my book, and inshallah, if you can always go back to the recording and check this out. I have written right here, nadhir. You can do the same thing. When you have a qa'ida in fiqh, right on the side, qa'ida, right, nadhir. Nadhir meaning something, another scenario that's comparable to the scenario we're going to speak about right now. He says, Na'am. When the fuqahas use the word na'am in their books, and we said this before, it's istidrak, meaning he wants to add to a previous point, or he wants to comment on a previous point. He made a point. Now he's making a comment about it. ما قيل بوجوبه كالدلك ينبغي تقديمه عليها. He's saying, when we're in this situation where I only have a limited amount of water, for example, the things that some people argued are an obligation, like a dalk we mentioned before, and that means when I'm washing my arm in wudu, I'm using this hand and I'm rubbing like this. Okay, that act, according to Imam Malik, it's wajib. According to our school, it's not wajib. Tamam, it's sunnah. Imam al-Malibari is telling us that within the Shafi'i school, when I'm going to do or I'm in this situation and I'm going to exclude certain acts. I'm going to exclude certain acts. I'm going to have to change the acts into a 3-tier level. Obligatory, sunnah. What am I going to have in the middle here? He said things that ulama differed on their status, whether they're an obligation or a sunnah. We said it's sunnah. Well, because other major ulama, they said it's an obligation, when I'm thinking about the amount of water I have and it's only enough for my obligation, I want to try and keep those things in if I can. If I can. But why is he saying this? He says, نظير ما مر من ندب تقديم الفائت بعذر على الحاضرة وإن فاتت الجماعة. He says there's a nadir here. What's the nadir, ya Sheikh? The nadir here is something we stated before. We said that it is recommended to pray the prayer that you have missed, that you had a legitimate excuse for, before the prayer of the hour, the time of the prayer that we're in right now, even if you miss the congregation, because some of the ulama argued that doing so is an obligation. Again, that previous scenario, you missed a prayer and you had a legitimate excuse. Let's just say when the time of Asr, there's a congregation of Asr about to happen, but I didn't pray Dhuhr and I had a legitimate excuse. What do? We said it's recommended that you go ahead and pray Dhuhr. It's recommended that you pray Dhuhr, even if you miss that jama'ah. Why? Because some of the ulama actually said that it'll be unlawful to go and pray Asr without praying Dhuhr first. So we said, because that opinion exists, we said it's recommended that you do so. You see, in that scenario, that other scenario is understood. Now, come back to our scenario. He's saying we need to divide the acts in a 3-tier system. Obligatory acts, things that we call obligatory, sunnahs, things that we call sunnahs, but some of the things that we call sunnahs that other ulama considered an obligation, I'm going to raise their rank. I'm going to put them in a step right in here. When I say I'm going to focus on the bare minimum, I'm going to include these things along with my obligatory acts, like I said in the prayer over there. Again, that would be a recommendation to do so, just because of the fact that there's these other opinions. Now we're moving on to our next segment. Now note, this segment right here is tayammum. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, فَتَيَمَّمُوا صَعِيدًا طَيِّبًا. One of the times that there was no water, one of the Sahaba, he rolled around in the dirt, and the Prophet ﷺ said, إِنَّمَا كَانَ يَكْفِيكَ أَن تَفْعَلُوا هَكَذَا, and he hit the ground and he started rubbing. Tamam? Tamam. The Imam, he summarized it in literally half a page. All of the ahkam of tayammum, he has it right there. It's literally 3 sentences. Tamam. There's a lot more details, and I will share them with you, inshallah ta'ala, on Telegram. Tamam? He says, Arkan, there's a tatimma part right here, so make that 4 sentences. He says, tatimmatun, a completion. Usually the ulama actually make this a separate chapter, but he's just making it a subsection in wudu. يتيمم عن الحدثين. You will do tayammum instead of your regular tahara عن الحدثين. حدثين, it means minor impurity and major impurity. Minor, that's what you do wudu for. Major, that's what you do الغسل for. تمام؟ لفقد ماء أو خوف محذور. He's giving you two reasons why you make tayammum. Two reasons why you make tayammum. There's more, but one might even just summarize it in those two. لفقد الماء, this could be any way. Can't find water. You lost the water that you had with you. The horse that had the water vanished. The bottle fell out of the car when you were driving. All possible scenarios. You forgot to pack it. You forgot to put it in the car. It's lost in the car. You can't find it anywhere. All of these forms, you're going to make tayammum. Some of these scenarios, your tayammum is valid. Some of your scenarios, your tayammum is not valid. Like you lost it in the car. They'll say, do tayammum and pray, but your tayammum is not sufficient and your prayer is not sufficient because you know that there is water, you just lost it. But all the other ones, those ones are sufficient because there is truly no water. He says, أو خوف محذور, you are afraid of something that is more harmful. It's a very general statement. What does he mean by this? What do the Shafi'i mean by this? We mean that you're unable to utilize the water. Literally, meaning something is stopping you from using the water, like a sickness, right? Or shar'an, you have an excuse, tamam, not to use the water. Again, that has a long list of things. I'll share that, inshallah ta'ala, in the Telegram group. He says, محذور من استعماله, meaning the mahdur, that thing is great enough to block you from using the water. Now he's going to move on and he's going to wrap up the shurut of tayammum in 3 words. طهور له أو بتراب طهور له غبار. You're going to use dirt. That's a condition, right? It has to be dirt. طهور, clean. And he's saying طهور. He didn't say طاهر. That means the dirt cannot be مستعمل. Can't be used before. Well, wait a minute. So there's turab musta'mal, like there's ma musta'mal? Yes. Okay, do I need qullatin for the dirt? No. You literally just move a little bit over. So with tayammum, we hit the ground and then we use it. So if I use this spot, now I'll move to this spot. It's that simple. Tamam? Lahu ghubar. We're not talking about sand. We're talking about dirt. Dirt that if I hit, you see a little bit of its particles up in the air. I'll send you a video where I actually took the person in the video to the soil, I hit it up, and you can see that difference, inshallah ta'ala. And when we say biturabin, he means khalis, nothing else mixed to it. No flour mixed into it, no cement mixed into it. It needs to be pure dirt. Well, what if there's a little bit of things and little fragments of things here and there in it? That's okay. It's not a big deal. We're talking about a substance that is similar to the dirt mixed in with the dirt. That's when there's a problem. He says وَأَرْكَانُهُ, meaning the arkan of tayammum. He says نِيَّةُ اسْتِبَاحَةِ الصَّلَاةِ الْمَفْرُوضَةِ, the intention that you're asking Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, by this action you're allowed to make salah. It's istibaha because tayammum is not an actual tahara. It's istibahatu fi'lin. It's istibahat fi'l. That means I am seeking permission from Allah that if I do X, He allows me to do Y. And that's what istibaha means. Who else does istibaha? And we said this before, a person with continuous hadath, like urine leakage. This individual, his intention for wudu, after he cleanses himself, is going to be what? Oh Allah, allow me by this act of wudu that I'm about to do, allow me to pray with it. It's called istibaha. He's asking Allah to allow this act that he's about to do for it to be mubah. Tamam? He says مقرونة. Oh, عفوا, that should be مقرونة بنقل تراب. يعني the niyyah happens as I'm moving the dirt. So I put my hands down and my niyyah is initiating and it's present as I am bringing the dirt back. ومسح وجهه, his face, ويديه, with that turab, the dirt on the hand. Now there's sunan, and the sunan of tayammum are the same as the sunan of wudu and ghusl. The only difference is that any sunnah that's related to the water is excluded. Like what? Like, for example, takhleel, like rubbing in. I'm not going to do any of those in tayammum because I'm dealing with dirt. I'm not dealing with water. Tamam? Those would be excluded. But the azkar, facing the qibla, all of that remains. Starting with the right before the left, tamam, that's going to remain. وهكذا. Now there's one more rukn that he did not mention, and again, I will give you the full list in Telegram, inshallah ta'ala, today, translated in Arabic and English. But there's one more rukn he did not mention, and that is at-tartib. You have to keep the order of these acts, face and then the hands. Tamam? Now he's going to mention two masail in regards to tayammum. I will break it down further in full detail, so it doesn't take away from our reading through the book. He says, وَلَوْ تَيَقَّنَ مَاءٌ آخِرَ الْوَقْتِ فَانْتِظَارُهُ أَفْضَلُ. Okay, the water is cut, and there's no water nearby. However, you know that someone is coming with water, and they will be there before the prayer of the hour ends. It's best that you wait for him, so that way, or for them, so that way your ibadah is done at what was intended, what we were commanded to do, which is wudu. That's better. But if you're not certain, you know someone's coming maybe, but you're not certain if they will be here or be there in time, then it's best that you just go ahead and make tayammum لِحُرْمَةِ الْوَقْتِ. Why? This is something very important. We have sacred times. The times of the prayer are sacred. The beginning is at the highest levels of preferability, that I should, when the prayer comes in, I should stop what I'm doing and I should pray. Tamam. If I have certainty of I can do things correctly and water is coming, sure, I can wait. But if not, khalas. So that way I can preserve and honor the time, right? I'm just going to go ahead and do my tayammum. He says, وَإِذَا امْتَنَعَ اسْتِعْمَالُهُ فِي عُضْوٍ وَجَبَ تَيَمُّمٌ وَغَسْلُ صَحِيحٍ وَمَسْحُ كُلِّ السَّاتِرِ الضَّارِ نزعه بماء ولا ترتيب بينهما لجنب أو عضوين فتيممان. Okay, we were actually just speaking about this issue. Someone had asked a question in regards to this in the room. Let's walk through this. And there's other details outside of this that I will share in the Telegram group, inshallah ta'ala, but let's just focus on dissecting this segment. If you cannot use water on a limb, okay? Afwan, there we go. If you cannot use water on a limb, what do you do? Now, what we're saying is that I can use water everywhere else except for, we'll say, my arm. This arm right here, okay? But I can't put the water here. Why? I'll say I have a cast on. Let's go with that for our scenario. There's a cast here, and I fractured my bone, so I can't remove the cast. If I remove the cast, it kind of defeats the purpose of having it in the first place. It needs to wait there. What do I do? My hand is free. My elbow is free. What do? I'm going to go make my wudu. Do everything that as I would normally do up until I get to this arm. Then what am I going to do? I'm going to wash the hand. I'm going to wash the elbow. Tamam. I'm going to wet my hand and run it over my cast. Of course, without soaking the cast, that would ruin it in any way. In some countries, the cast they use, if you were to soak it in water, it'll come off. So be careful. Tamam? And then what? And then I'm going to stop my wudu. And I'm going to go do tayammum. Why am I going to do tayammum? For the arm that cannot be uncovered. Then after I finish tayammum, I'm going to come back and fulfill my wudu. Tamam? So the one after this, I pick up from there and finish my wudu. طيب. أو عضوين. Well, it was my left arm and my left arm and my left foot. Then tayammuman. One when I get here, one when I get there. Oh, but this feels like a hardship. Why are we doing all of this? Because I have water and limbs can't be used with the water. There's no reason for me to make tayammum. This arm is fine. Tamam. So I'll have to use water here. And the Prophet ﷺ said, إِذَا أَمَرْتُكُمْ بِأَمْرٍ فَأْتُوا مِنْهُ مَا اسْتَطَعْتُمْ. If I give you a command to do something, then do as you are able to. So you're not able to wash this arm, but you can do tayammum for it. So you're going to do tayammum for it. Tamam. And then the rest can be washed. وَلَا تَرْتِيبَ بَيْنَهُمَا لِلْجُنُبِ. But what if someone is not trying to make wudu? They have the cast around their arm and they have to take a shower. That's okay. There's no tartib. The tartib, meaning making wudu up until this arm, making tayammum for the arm, and then picking up, that's because there's tartib in wudu. But if I do a shower instead of wudu, tamam, then I can do the tayammum and then go into the shower, or vice versa. Doesn't matter. I don't need to stop my shower and go make tayammum. Tamam. So it tends to be a little bit easier for people. You know what? I'm just gonna go into the shower for my wudu instead. Let me swing by and do a tayammum real quick in my front yard. Sure, that is definitely easier. Yes, there's other opinions that say, well, no, you don't have to do all that. Just do a full tayammum, and other opinions say otherwise, such as just run the water over it with a wet hand, and that's it. But none of that is the mu'tamad. What the author stated here is the mu'tamad of the Shafi'i school. Oh, but it's too much. It's a hardship. That's okay. You can utilize the other opinions if that is such a hardship that you can't fulfill. Tamam? So you can always follow the other schools if you have gotten to that extent. Tamam? So we covered the tayammum. Now we're going to begin on nawaqid al-wudu. وَلِلَّهِ الْحَمْدِ وَالْمِنَّةِ. Oh, عفوا, one more mas'ala. وَلَا يُصَلِّي بِهِ إِلَى فَرْضًا وَاحِدًا وَلَوْ نَذْرًا. And we really covered this before. We did. When we spoke about that min hadath, we said he's like the mutayammim. He can only do one obligatory act per tayammum, or per his wudu. And we said in tayammum as well. Alhamdulillah, I mean, we've mentioned this before, so this should be easier to know. وَلَوْ نَذْرًا. Even if it's a prayer that he decided to do per an oath that he made. So he took an oath by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that he's going to pray 2 rak'ah. Now those 2 rak'ah become an obligation upon him. So he can only utilize one tayammum for that act. But when it comes to sunnah prayers, he can pray as many sunnah prayers as he wants. La ishkal with that one tayammum. It's only with the obligatory salawat. He says, وَصَحَّ جَنَائِزٌ أو جَنَائِزُ مَعَ فَرْضٍ. And there's khilaf amongst our ashabana. Ibn Hajar, he says, yes, exactly what he said here. Salat al-janaiz is not an obligation. All right, it's not an obligatory prayer. And therefore it's treated like the sunnah prayers. Tamam. But now here's a question. And this is a little bit of research for anyone that wants to get a little bit deeper in this mas'ala. Do we then say that the janaza prayer is not by definition a prayer altogether? And that's something for your own research. I recommend looking at some of the hawashi and exploring the arguments on that. For Ibn Hajar, it's called a prayer, but it's not a shar'i prayer. Imam al-Ramli has something else to say about that. So does al-Khatib al-Shirbini and even Shaykh al-Islam Zakaria al-Ansari. So take that question and explore with it, inshaAllah ta'ala. Right, let's begin with the nawaqid, the nullifiers of wudu and your salah. Because if you nullify your wudu, then by necessity you nullify your salah. Here's something a lot of people are not aware of too. Whatever nullifies the fast nullifies the prayer. There you go. You have a little bit extra. However, not the other way around. What nullifies the prayer does not nullify the fast. All of this comes again from al-qawa'id al-fiqhiyah. نسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى التوفيق. He says, وَنَوَاقِدُهُ أي أسباب نواقد الوضوء أربعة. And this hasr is ta'abbudi, meaning this quantity comes from the Sharia. It's not something that we can make up. However, we can change the numbering, but it will never change those four. Meaning those four will always stay, but then I can readjust them. Like for example, the first one is خروج شيء من أحد سبيلي الحي. تمام. Just that. Okay. F1. There was just a little alert there. تمام. خروج شيء من أحد السبيلين. I could say anything being released from the front private part, the rear private part, okay, and call them two instead of one. Tamam, that's fine, but when you summarize them down to the bare minimum, you will always be left with those four. He says, أحدها تيقن خروج شيء غير منيه. The release of anything from the private areas, 2 for males, 3 for females. غير منيه, aside from semen. Many. Tamam? Because for us, this requires a ghusl. And since it requires a ghusl, then it's nullifying your ghusl. Saying that it nullifies your wudu would be redundant. Because having a wudu afterwards does absolutely nothing for you and the ability to pray. عَيْنًا كَانَ أَوْ رِيحًا, whether there was a substance that was released or there was ريح, يعني passing gas. رَطْبًا أَوْ جَافًا, whether what was released, that secretion, whether it was dry, solid, or it was moist and wet, doesn't matter. معتادا كبول أو نادرا كدم باسور أو غيره, whether it was something that is normally released from the body, such as urine, or rarely. When you say rarely, it means يعني, it's not the norm amongst humans. Someone would be, for this next one, they would have to be sick to have it. The release of blood for somebody with hemorrhoids. تمام. انفصل أو لا, whether it has completely separated from the body or is simply basically still connected or still يعني, not fully exited from the secretion area. تمام. And he gives us an interesting example. كدودة أخرجت رأسها ثم رجعت. Worms in many countries of the world is still something that people suffer from when they eat certain foods that were not necessarily cleaned correctly. So what could easily happen is that a person has a lot of worms in their intestines. And until they actually take the medication to exterminate those worms, when they go to relieve themselves, they will release worms, sometimes alive, sometimes dead. So let's just say a person is relieving themselves and one of them was about to come out, but it was able to wiggle back in. That situation would still obligate a wudu because that scenario has nullified the wudu of the person. من أحد سبيلي المتوضئ, from the two or one of the two private parts of the person that normally makes wudu. A person that is in the rafahiyya. Okay, but hold on. Why two? We know that females have 3. So why do all of the fuqaha say sabilay, sabilain, knowing for a fact that half of the population has 3? It's called jariyun ala al-ghalib. It's like when in America, for example, in English you'll say number 1, number 2, the front and the back, the front and the rear. Everyone understands that there's a number 3, but they'll still say number 1 and number 2. Tamam. This in the books of fiqh is called jaryun ala al-ghalib. Fuqaha sometimes do it intentionally and sometimes not intentionally. Intentionally when he doesn't really need to explain that. Like, you should have gotten that. I mean, it's obvious. It's like saying all humans should, wash their fingers. Well, Sheikh, how come you're not saying all 10? He doesn't have to say 10. It's a given, right? Wash your hands. You don't have to say 2 hands because everyone has 2 hands, right? So that's called jariyun ala al-ghalib. And a lot of times, most of the times really, the fuqaha will just do that deliberately on things that, I can save ink instead of getting into all of that because you know what I'm talking about. Why do I have to explain it? But this also caused trouble throughout the generations, right? And some of the ulama, though, like for example, I believe it was Imam al-Isnawi, if I'm not mistaken, he has a beautiful statement. He says that the earlier ulama, they didn't speak about a lot of things because it was part of their culture. It was the norm. But then the norms changed and they didn't write about those norms. And you're reading what they're saying and they're like, why is the sheikh, what is he talking about? What is he saying? Because the norms changed, right? And while collectively it's not a big issue, individually, when individual scholars write things, it does cause problems. Tamam. You're a Shafi'i. Why does everyone like Matn Abi Shuja' over other books from the same time period that are more comprehensive, more filled with details? Well, for one, Abi Shuja' is sticking to the universal concepts of fiqh. He's not getting into customary details and differences. So automatically, the book can surpass all time, right? It becomes suitable to the end of time, right? Because it's not preaching to a certain set of customs and traditions that only existed in a certain location or in a certain century. And therefore, it's allowing me to take the book and re-explain it in a way that would fit my time zone, my current era, right? And that's the beauty of it. However, the mutafaqih can't become a faqih from books like that. A beginner can learn the basics, but tafaqquh would need to dig deep into the minds of the Shafi'i ulama of the past in layers. My most recent, then those before them, then those before them, then those before them, until I get all the way back to Imam Shafi'i itself. Each stage I'm understanding the social political norms, the social economic norms, how people lived, what they wore. I need to know those details so I know what they're talking about. تمام؟ طيب. He says, الحي دبرا كان أو قبلا, front or the rear, doesn't matter which exit point. ولو كان الخارج باسورا نابتا داخل الدبر فخرج أو زاد خروجه. Hemorrhoids is basically where the skin around the rear's exit point starts to expand and growth and balloon. Tamam. This is very, very painful. Extremely painful. And a lot of times it bleeds. Now, when that skin does that expansion, if the starting point of those little balloons, right, starts from the inside to the out, It's not the ring itself on the outside, it's from the inside out. Once it crosses the exit point, by the rules that we've just said, you're going to have to make wudu. Even if it's just still hanging out and you have not applied medication or used any treatment to get it to go back in, get it to reduce. You're going to have to make wudu. However, he says, however, أفتى العلامة الكمال الرداد بعدم النقد بخروج الباسور نفسه بل بالخارج منه كالدم. الإمام الرداد, تمام, one of our ashab from the ulama of Yemen, he said that skin, that description should not break the wudu within itself, because it's not a foreign object that has left the body, it's the skin itself that has simply expanded. He says, but if you want to argue that the wudu has been broken from this, you would have to say that's due to the blood or the fluids or whatever substance that might be exiting with it, if there was, not from the skin itself's expansion. This is very, very important. And you could apply this to the other end by saying, imagine there was a growth in the urethra, and that growth extended from inside the urethra to the outside of the urine organ. But that's the skin. It's not something that has passed through and exited. Therefore, according to Imam al-Raddad, you can't nullify with that because you did not have a substance that was secreted. Tamam? He says, وَعِنْدَ مَالِكٍ لَا يَنْتَقِدُ الْوُضُوءُ بِالنَّادِرِ. So if someone were to eat a piece of wood and it came out, nothing else with it, just that piece of wood came out, or a little plastic thing, and only that came out, hypothetically, well, Imam Malik would say, then the wudu is not nullified, unless another substance came out with it, with that object. Tamam? وَثَانِيهَا, and this will be the last part that we'll cover today. Inshallah, let me see what our time, see how far we can go in it. Oh, it's already 11. Actually, then we'll stop here. We'll stop at Zawalul Aql. Zawalul Aql. And that is sanity and presence and alertness. And there's different degrees to that. We'll cover that in our next class. بإذن ta'ala. Any questions, put them into Telegram. وأقول قولي هذا وأستغفر الله تعالى لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.